Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session, Teach, Learn, Connect, a Constructivist Guide to Today's Moodle. I'm Heather Robinson, Learning Design Team Manager at Moodle. I live in the U.S. in the state of Wyoming by Yellowstone National Park. I've been teaching and designing with Moodle since 2007 in both higher education and corporate learning environments. I earned my PhD in learning technologies in 2016, and I've continued to research and publish on topics like improving online learning, fostering collaborative learning environments, and applying care theory in digital education. And outside of work, I love hiking and exploring nature.
And I'm Annie Sheffield, and I love to play with designing authentic, collaborative learning experiences. I've lived and studied on 3 different continents. So related to that, for my master's thesis, I researched how online international school teachers connected with their culturally diverse students. During my PhD in learning technologies, I studied and published about constructivist online teaching principles, and my dissertation explored collaborative online learning environments. Outside of work, I like to mountain bike, and the trails behind my house have mountain lions and rattlesnakes in them. So I get a little thrill every time I go out there. I've seen rattlesnakes, but I haven't seen a mountain lion yet. And when I'm not on the trails, I enjoy playing in my garden.
Okay, so today we're going to explore Moodle, not just as a course delivery platform, but as a powerful, pedagogically grounded environment that can help us create more meaningful learning experiences for our students.
Yeah, so Heather, you and I, we've worked with a lot of different clients, and I think we've both seen that the most common use of Moodle is to post reading assignments or learning packages, presentations, and for collecting assignments. And I think we both advocate that there's so much more we can be doing with Moodle.
Yes, absolutely agree. Moodle has evolved significantly, and its current design supports a social constructivist approach where learning can happen through interaction, collaboration, and shared exploration. It's especially effective in online and blending learning environments.
Yes, it's about designing for engagement, student engagement, and not just delivering content.
Exactly. So today we're going to look at how tools like forums, activities, and thoughtful course structure can be aligned with learning theory to deepen engagement. And we're going to go through practical examples that show you how this plays out in real courses.
And Heather and I built a space where we can all discuss this and how you might share what you do in your own teaching.
So we want this session to be reflective and collaborative. Along the way, we'll invite you to consider your own teaching practices and explore how Moodle can support a culture of ongoing community-based learning in your courses.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how you're all using it.
That's a key part of today, learning from each other as a faculty community. If we were in person, we would discuss this, have some Q&A, but Annie and I are going to have that course ready to take all of our discussions offline, and we'll give you some more details about that later. So let's go ahead and get started with a quick look at how Moodle's design principles align with core pedagogical values.
So there's a word or a term that we're going to be using here. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but I want to define it before we get any further. Social constructivism is the term, and it's active knowledge construction through collaboration with others and working with others. So culture and environment come into play here. They're important pieces in the learning environment, as well as a higher level of instructor or facilitator level of facilitation comes into play. It's definitely a student-centered approach rather than an instructor-centered approach. It's a learning theory. So while pedagogy is an approach to learning, social constructivism guides how to implement the approach in our teaching.
Okay, and we're also going to look at community-based learning. This is where we can integrate real-world examples, case studies, meetings, or other learning opportunities with individuals working in a field of study into the online learning space. Moodle was developed with roots in social learning theory or social constructionism, whether students or learners are collaborating on a project or in real time, or engaging in discussion forums at their own pace. The objective really remains the same, and that's to create a learning environment that taps into social and collaborative aspects of human nature, and also enriching the educational experience.
Let's take a closer look at how the course creator can help bring each of these concepts into Moodle and into an online learning environment, like what the learner and the instructor's role look like in a social constructive learning environment.
So as we were brainstorming for this session and discussion, we started by asking each other the question, how would you start when approaching an online course, and kind of deciding what Moodle tools you should use?
Yeah, and one of the first places my mind goes is to a great resource called the Moodle Tool Guide. It's a guide that's been put together by some of our Moodle community members, and it gives me inspiration on tools that I can use to make a course learner focused. And I'll share that with you later on.
And I first thought about what I would want learners to be able to do by the end of the course. So it's an important thing for us to discuss this, because each of us would likely do something a little bit different. And the research we have done in the past has helped our understanding of this a bit. The way we approach teaching and learning is influenced by our own individual experiences, and really in particular how we were educated or how we were taught. So we tend to teach the way we were taught. But also, Annie and I, in this stage of our life, we have also talked about how our children's experiences were in education and how they have also been taught.
Absolutely. Those influences play a much bigger role than I think we ever give them credit for in our behavior in the classroom. So we're going to frame this conversation around something like a final exam or a placement test. And Heather and I will play a role of a teacher and a learning designer as we try to design a course for this outcome.
Okay, so Annie, let's say I'm designing an online chemistry course. Where do I start?
All right, I always start at the end. When the course is finished, what do you want learners to be able to do?
For this course, I want them to be able to pass the exam. So in many educational contexts, the outcome isn't really well defined beyond that test.
That is absolutely true. That's the nature of our educational culture right now. But I know that we all hope that our learners take away real-world skills from our classes. A well-defined final exam can measure what a learner will be able to do. For example, a doctor can practice medicine when they have passed their medical exams. That's not the only way that we prepare them to practice medicine, but it is a key way to measure it. A lawyer can practice law after they've passed their law exams. So the outcome of your chemistry course might not be quite as obvious as this, but think about what you want your chemistry students to be able to do. What do you want them to be able to do if they pass the exam?
Okay, so I would hope that my students could apply principles of the course to solve chemical problems. and have a conversation about the main chemistry principles that we've covered in class. They should be literate in the language of chemistry. The chemistry student might not organically bump into a lot of chemistry conversations kind of in their day-to-day life. So we want them to understand the world around them to a reasonable degree. We also want the course to be kind of a springboard to jump off into other pursuits in chemistry if they choose, kind of a ticket in their pocket for their next chemical adventure.
Chemical romance. No, my kid and I have a joke about that. So what are some authentic real world experiences that your learners could engage in to gain some of these skills and the knowledge that they need to pass the test and to have a basic literacy in chemistry?
So labs, like that's an important piece of chemistry. Labs that are closely related to real world scenarios, case studies, some current events showcasing chemical problems, puzzles, historical events show challenges and growth that kind of led us to what we know today, and simulations that can help us see chemistry happening on a different scale. If my class had rich experiences like these that covered the main pillars of my chemistry class, how could we create those in Moodle?
Such great, authentic learning experiences. I love that list. So one of the ways that we might approach this is through collaboratively trying to create some experiences like your lab and your case study and your simulation, where the learners can collaborate. Collaboration is a real key to constructivist learning. It helps us all to construct knowledge when we try and get on the same page and negotiate the meaning of what is truth in this material. That's one of the hallmarks of constructivist learning theory. Sometimes learners wrestle with the material in their mind. Sometimes they do that on paper. And other times they have to come to an agreement with the people that they're working with about what the material means. So we can design some of these rich, collaborative, authentic experiences with Moodle tools like these. You could use a forum. That's a tool that most people know and have used or seen online. You could use that to design to debate, have your students debate a case study. You could use a glossary or a database in Moodle to have students contribute examples of phenomenon that they encounter in everyday life. People who aren't familiar with Moodle might think of a glossary or a database as a way to distribute material, but in Moodle, we use those to collect entries from our learners. You could use lessons, which are a cool tool, or interactive books to simulate real-world decisions. So you might take a chemical path to develop to the development of some medicine, or making choices in a fictional, maybe environmental crisis. You can use embedded simulations or quizzes or branching scenarios in these two tools to help the students explore the different outcomes of those choices. Another couple of tools that you could use for groups to collaborate are a group wiki, where they can co-create explanations, or a group assignment, where they can collaborate on maybe a lab report, or they could each contribute part of the answer to a puzzle.
Yeah, these are great ideas. So I also wonder about if the Moodle tool matters. And I think, yes, it does, and no, but it matters in the sense that it really needs to match the type of learning that we're aiming for. Moodle tools are kind of like instruments, and they all have potential, but the key is really choosing the right one for the job. If my goal is collaborative meaning making, then tools like forums, wikis, and workshops, those are good choices because they will allow for the discussion to happen, feedback from peers and the instructor, and really that co-construction of knowledge that you talked about. If we want to simulate a complex process or decision making, maybe something like a lesson would give that students the branching choices and simulate that flow of a real world scenario. And then lab experiences, which seem to me kind of difficult. Like that seems to be one of the harder things to bring into the online space, but we could use those simulations, external simulations, embedding those right into Moodle in a page or a book, but then also following up with some type of assessment or self-check quizzes or assessment to kind of solidify learning.
Yeah, I love those examples. I love the option of embedding some lab simulation that some other group has developed. Maybe a really rich thing that you don't have the funding to develop, you can embed it in your Moodle course. So I think the most important thing is, this goes back to what I said in the beginning, is to start with your learning goal and what type of cognitive work that you want your students to do. And once that's clear, then you can choose the correct tool for the experience, whether it's engaging in a dialogue, exploring a process, solving a problem, or reflecting on concept. And it doesn't have to be a complex design. Some really well-designed discussion forums that ask students to analyze maybe a case study from multiple perspectives, like a scientist, a policymaker, a citizen. This can be just as powerful as a simulation. The magic really comes when you frame the activity, not just from the tool itself.
Okay, so going to switch over now to talk about what the learner needs to understand, really about working in a social constructivist learning environment. Really, it's, you know, do they even see any difference, or how do they identify this learning environment as different, or do they?
Yeah, you know, in some cases they might not realize it, but I think if the instructor or facilitator is really in tune and designing this well, I think it becomes obvious. We design and prepare for this in an online learning environment, but there's always the concern that your students won't engage, and that this is probably even trickier when it's an online space. So I think setting the expectations for the students that this is not a passive learning process. It's a really active part of their learning journey. They should be given opportunities to question concepts and to try to make their own meaning. They can work with their peers, workshopping to solve problems, engaging, debating. All of these things need to be framed for the instructor, by the instructor, to let the students know that this is what the expectation is of the course.
So some of the essential online learning, teaching, and pedagogical practices are really relevant here as the foundation. Things like communication, modeling, and feedback. Bringing human dimension and care into online learning is also a piece of that foundation.
Absolutely. Yeah, so building on the topic of human intervention and care, when we learn something about ourselves or others, we grow. And so when we interact with others, we actually interact more efficiently when we know them better. So students can gain a new understanding of themselves. It's important for teachers to create a learning environment that is inclusive and interactive, which really is possible in an online learning environment. And it aligns really well with social constructivism.
So let's take a look at some tools that we can use in Moodle to support human dimension and care. So a synchronous tool that we can use is Big Blue Button web conferencing system that can be used to foster engagement. We can use it with whole group, whole course groups, where instructors can give feedback. We can answer questions in time. Breakout rooms are great for small group work, collaborative and really cooperative learning sessions. They give students a great place to kind of bounce ideas off of each other and really, dig into some of the work that they need to accomplish for the course. One asynchronous tool, and we've talked about forums a lot, but it's a great standby. So a few suggestions that you can use for integrating the human dimension is thinking about facilitating some lively conversations, some debates, maybe using positions or debate forums to allow students to choose a side of a debate. But make sure that the learning or that the forum is kind of aligned with your learning objectives. But you can also encourage the use of video, audio, and other media to upload in a forum space. And then a Moodle feature, not really a tool, but it's a feature. So using the profile, Moodle profile, can encourage students to update their profile with a photo, hobbies, talking about their pets, their family, where they live. And you can model this by including things about yourself too, so students can get to know you better. So I like to make that face-to-name connection early on in the course with my students.
Yeah, it's really important in those early weeks to help learners make connections, whether they find something in common with their geographical location or they learn that they've got a shared hobby. This information gives learners opportunities to connect. And that's really essential for collaborating and having trust and the group work that will come later in the course.
And our screens can connect us with our fellow learners and instructors so that we can work through things that we don't understand and work with materials together that we may have questions about or need to understand better. So online learning is much more than Zoom calls and videos. It's like working remotely. We meet people, we share ideas, we give feedback, and we work on projects together. Yeah.
And there are certainly some challenges in learning and working like this, and we've all seen that. A couple of challenges that I saw in my doctoral dissertation is that different group dynamics and personalities can make collaboration challenging, especially challenging for some people and less effective maybe for others. So high achieving students, they often end up carrying more of the workload in group tasks because they really care about their grade, or because other students aren't contributing equally and they need to take up the slack. So this can lead these high achieving students to feel stress and resentment and burnout. And they might even feel penalized for having to work with others, which is a tough one to work around. You also have participation gaps. So your students who might struggle academically might really lean on their higher achieving peers in this group setting. They might contribute less and might not personally engage with the material to the degree that they need to in order to learn it. So it might actually be detrimental to their long-term success to be collaborating with learners. And so it's really important to design collaborative learning environments with these things in mind, or have a variety so that you're not consistently creating some of these challenges.
Some of the other challenges I've experienced teaching online, accountability and visibility. So in the online learning space, it's harder to see who is doing what unless we're really intentionally building ways to track learners' contributions. We can use structured discussion posts and peer feedback tools, look at version histories and wikis and collaborative documents to help that. Time zones and schedules. So this is, unlike in a traditional classroom, students might be juggling jobs and family responsibilities, but living in different time zones. And so the collaboration requires clear deadlines, really good communications, and asynchronous options are always a good choice too, so that learners can contribute even if they can't meet in a live synchronous meeting. And then tech familiarity. Not everyone is equally comfortable navigating all the digital tools. So if we're going to rely on the tools that Moodle offers for collaboration, we need to make sure that the students know how to use them and have a chance to practice them before as much as they can before they have to actually, work with their peers in some type of assessment or true collaborative learning nature.
And I think these challenges with collaborative online learning would be great conversations for us to have in our online course that follows this. So we would love for you to join this conversation that we're going to provide in the course that we're going to provide you. We'll have some resources in there, and we hope that you'll engage with us and share your ideas for making successful collaborative learning environments and talking about how this works well for you.
So as we wrap up our session today, we want to thank you for taking the time to explore Moodle through the lens of social constructivism with us. Our hope is that you're walking away with a few new ideas on how to use Moodle tools more intentionally, and also just a renewed focus on designing learning that's authentic and collaborative and human-centered.
Absolutely. Teaching and learning does not have to feel disconnected or transactional. With the right design and facilitation, it can feel meaningful, personal, even joyful for both the instructor and the learners. It's not about using every tool that Moodle offers, but it's about selecting the right tools for the goals that you have and creating a space for your students to co-construct knowledge together.
So we encourage you to reflect on your own courses, your own practices, and think about the following questions. How are you already supporting community-based learning? Where might you make small changes to invite more collaboration or connection? And how could your role as a facilitator shift to support more learner agency?
And we, again, invite you to continue this discussion in our companion online course. We've put together a space for this deeper conversation, for sharing resources, not just for handing you resources, but for you to give them to one another and sharing your experiences. We would really love to hear from you.
So let's keep learning together. Thank you again for joining us. Whether you're just starting with Moodle or you've been using it for years, there's always room to evolve our practice and strengthen our learning communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you.